Good morning, everybody. This is another AREI Global Gathering, and our guest this morning is the wonderful Tina Powers. Tina has an amazing background in media, and she's going to be talking about her life as a television anchor, TV co-host, co-host of various telethons and all kinds of things, and comparing that with her life, her new life as a medium, and a medium to the stars.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this format. I'm so excited about what you're creating, this global network, the messages getting out, and everybody finding each other. It's wonderful.
I'd like to start you off and tell us a little bit about your career in television, in the media. I know it's extensive, and how that actually led to mediumship, or why you made the change.
I studied broadcast communications in college. I was very interested in theater and other sorts of performance art, but my father said, why don't you get a secure job in television? And at one point, I remember being at a hostage situation and saying, I don't think this is what my dad had in mind for security, because the news happens to be about death, doom, and destruction. So it became, as a news anchor, welcome to death, doom, and destruction. Look what didn't happen to you today. I studied it in school, started out with an internship, and it started to grow from there. My very, very first press conference that I went to, and it was because I was the only reporter in the room, and I just started out, was 23, there was nobody else to send, it was to Robert Redford. And I remember showing up, and he was campaigning it was a congressman, Mo Udall at that time, and he was very ahead of the times in the green world as far as recycling and repurposing. But I remember showing up and meeting, and I couldn't believe Robert Redford's right in front of me. And he was very lovely, and he knew that I didn't know what I was doing. And that's a true professional, when they're very kind to you, and when he helped me with the interview. I found in television news that, news just used to be something new. It was something we didn't know. And then somehow it's turned into infotainment about who's in rehab, who's not. But I will say this about journalism. I never knew who I was going to meet that day. Much like the other worlds, you never know who you're going to meet that day, or who you'll be drawn to, or who will come to visit. So one day I had the amazing pleasure of meeting Rosa Parks, who here in America helped change, started the civil rights movement. Then the next day I might be with a gentleman who was homeless and in his car, and that he couldn't figure out a shelter that would take his dog. So it became that I found that every soul was important, and everybody had a story. And all of us do have stories, and they all are important. So it was my honor to tell them. But as I went through the years, when I first started, there weren't that many women in the newsroom that I was in, and they were all smoking cigarettes, the men, and they were drinking. It was quite a men's club. And, being in there, being young, you really had to learn how to stand up for yourself, learn how to have your voice, also learn how to have focus, which also goes with mediumship. I will tell you, though, a turning point for me, and I believe we all have them in our lives, is when I was at a drive-by shooting of a young boy. And the game in news, I think, is to be number one. I don't know if you've ever seen those advertisements, or if they have them all over the world. We're number one. We'll bring you the news first. But I was sent to the scene of a little boy who had been shot on the way home from school. And in that moment, I witnessed the father coming on the scene. And I had this moment of embarrassment that I was there, that I had a photographer with me recording what was happening. And the raw emotion of finding out that his son died and recording that and putting it on the air, I just had a moment where that wasn't for me anymore. So this little boy from the other side, from the other worlds, actually is the one who woke me up. So when I was talking with the father, it turned out more grief counseling in that moment. And I said, let's talk about your son. And all these news stations are going to talk about him. They're going to put it on. I said, tell me what your son loves. Tell me about him. Tell me the story. Tell me whatever you need to. And so he said, I will, under one condition. And that condition is that you don't follow me around. You know how in all of the movies, the reporters are following everybody around and they're ruthless and all of that. And I said, you have my word. I will not follow you. I will not follow up. This is just this moment. So we talked about his son, and I went on the air, and the CBS affiliate had an exclusive. And I went back to the station. They said, we're sending you back out again. And I said, no. So those moments in our lives where we say no, we have boundaries, integrity is way more important than any job. The chips, I was like, the chips will fall where they do. But of course, in the newsroom, it looked like they looked at me like I'd grown 3 heads. They're like, what do you mean you're refusing an assignment? And I said, well, my word is more important than an assignment. So that's how I would say I got out of television news. As a child, I would see spirits in my room, but I was probably, I want to say, under 5. And I was not sure what was happening. I was very clairsentient too. I could feel energies around me. And I think a lot of children are. They just came from the other world, and a well-meaning adult hasn't told them that's not true, or this is how it is. And so for me, when I quit the news, or when I stopped putting all that negativity in my mind, the gift from when I was younger started to come back in to help people. And there are many similarities, I would say, between the news, or anchoring the news, and mediumship. It would be focus. It would be laser-like focus during a reading, because as an anchor, no matter what's happening around you, I mean, it can be complete chaos, but you have to focus and talk to hundreds of thousands of people at one time. And so nothing can interfere. And in mediumship, you have to focus and hold that energy and vibration so that you can attune yourself to hear what the spirit is saying, to feel, to all of that. So I call it reporting for the other side for me many times. And so I'm very grateful to do this work. It isn't something that I sought out. It was something that became a very powerful force in my life. As far as I did it for free for a very long time. If somebody needed help, I would just, and those people were brought to me, I'm sure, for me to learn from and to start having confidence that this was real. So I would say to you, if I fast forward, I had gone to the spiritualist camp at Camp Chesterfield. Does anybody know? Have you heard of that?
Absolutely, yes.
And I ended up living in Indiana, which it's funny how spirit and our soul takes us to certain destiny points. So I was living in Indiana, and somebody mentioned to me Camp Chesterfield. So I went to the church there, and I was sitting there watching in astonishment. And I said, this is a church, because I was brought up Catholic, that talks to dead people. This is the best thing ever. And so in that moment, there was a psychometry reading, which I'm sure you all know about that. They passed around a hat, and I put a ring in there, and some other people put other items to be read. And the woman pulled out my ring, and she said, "You'll be going to school." And that's all she said to me. And I'm like, at the moment, I'm like, oh, great. That's my message. Everybody has earth-shattering messages happening, and I am going to school. So at the end of the church service, they said, we have a seminary here, and it's for the next week, and you're all invited. And I said, oh, I'm going to school. I'm staying. So I ended up staying, and I had so many eye-opening experiences. It was the first time they were like, get up and give messages. And that was not an easy thing to do, because I learned you question yourself. There's always maybe some doubt. And I had this great teacher that said to me, Tina, for as right as you can be, don't be afraid to be wrong. Because, and that goes for life as well. Because if we're so afraid of being wrong, we contract, we get smaller, we don't allow ourselves to relax and let the flow go through. But she put me up there and she said, leave your ego at the door. Just give what you get. Give what you get. And it's in service to help people. So that's how I really started.
Absolutely fabulous, Tina. That is there is so much there for us. So tell us, what are the good things and the bad? What's the best thing for you about being a medium? And let's start with the good stuff first. What's the best?
The best is, and I'll go back to one of my very first experiences of delivering a message. The woman that I read for, her, and this was one of the first people who came through. I heard the name Lottie, or the word Lottie, very loudly inside my mind. And I thought, lottery? What's happening here? So I just said, does the word Lottie mean anything to you? And she said, yes, I had an Aunt Charlotte. We used to call her Lottie. And, but she died 30 years ago. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And then I saw a shoe in my mind's eye. So many times I try to tell people, clairvoyance isn't just the apparition or the burning bush. It's a lot of times just inside your mind's eye and trusting it. So I see the shoe, and she says she had a shoe store in Britain, and we were in. And then her mother came through after that and told her she was sorry for criticizing her, that she was sorry that she put so much pressure on her, that she was a good daughter. And again, I was very aware, I am the messenger. I am not the reason for it. I was just the conduit. After that moment, and I would say a couple hours later, I looked at her and her face lifted. There was an easefulness in her face. She was brighter. It was a healing for her to hear this from her mother. So for me, witnessing that and having her have relief and not go through the rest of her time on the earth thinking that her mother didn't think that much of her and having other self-worth issues, that's the best part of delivering a message to somebody that can help them move forward. That can help somebody, believe again that there's a larger reason that they're on the earth, that they have a purpose to fulfill. And so that's one of the best parts of being a medium. Also, another wonderful part is that I love to help people open up to their own gifts. I believe that we all have gifts and abilities to do this. Some people might do it professionally. Some people can do that for themselves, but we were born with an inner compass. We were born and we were somehow socialized out of it. So for me, I get great pleasure and purpose in helping people discover their own gifts and talents. That to me is the best.
So what would you advise anybody here listening to this in order to open up their own direct communication?
I would advise them that a lot of times when we ask for help, or we're talking to our guides, or we're asking for a particular person, that when we ask for it, either mentally or out loud, that we trust what we're receiving and we don't edit it and we don't go, oh, I'm just making that up. That we allow it to flow, trusting ourselves and the messages we're receiving. Spirit will confirm it for you. They might not confirm it right at that moment, but in my work, I've been in front of 200 people before, and I've had a woman say no, 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 and then right afterwards, it was her son Jeffrey had shown up. And he kept saying that there was something in her purse that had handwriting on it, and he had given it to her. And she was standing in front of 200 people saying, nope, no, no. And thank goodness, I think there's a grace given when you're giving messages and when you're really, intending to be of service. So I didn't plug into the negativity. But I found out later on, I was signing a book. She comes up to me sobbing, and she said, Tina, she threw this handkerchief in front of me. It said Barbara embroidered on it. She said, I put this in my purse this morning. I forgot that I did this, and I'm so sorry. And I know it's him. And then, of course, the person with me said, couldn't she have done that in front of the hundreds of people? And for me, it was like, no, it was much more powerful for her to realize that it really was her son. And then the second thing was, it was really important for me to listen to spirit instead of who's in front of me and not taking responsibility for the reaction.
Very interesting. Tell me, do you ever get people through fairly soon after they've crossed over? And how soon would you say it's appropriate for somebody to seek a reading?
I think it's all individual. I mean, I know that some mediums have a certain time period. I have actually, in certain cases, a friend or somebody's called me right after they passed and they were available. Sometimes, depending on the person on the earth and their process and where they are in their bereavement, and if they want to go there and be with the person, then my guides won't allow that to happen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So depending on the fragility of the individual in front of me. So for me, it's been in my work, sometimes it's right away, and then sometimes it could be up to 6 months.
So how tiring is it for you doing sort of very emotional readings?
That's a good question. When I first started reading, I would open the channel for perhaps too long. And so I would keep going because I was wanting to help so much. I have found the more centered and strength I become, I can get tired, but I'm not as tired if I don't get emotionally involved, just like the news anchor. When I was delivering the message, if I got too emotionally involved, nobody wanted a crying news anchor, and nobody wants a medium who's having an emotional reaction. I mean, it's okay to have one, but to totally plug into the energy, it's staying clear so that I could keep delivering the information. I haven't really noticed. Sometimes the children actually give me energy because they come through as sometimes such evolved souls. For me, it's been the people on the earth and where they are sometimes that's actually drained me perhaps more and helping with the healing on that level. Of course, being mindful of my energy, I've learned I can only do really, up to 5 a day if I'm at an event, but I don't usually do, in my own private practice, I do 2 to 3 a day because I find that my energy has to go a lot higher and faster. And then their energy, of course, is meeting with me, and it can be very draining. So it's been a learning curve, and it's still ongoing. But a lot of times I find the energy on the other side uplifting. But I have had, now that I'm, recalling, I've had maybe perhaps a very serious issue where, there had been perhaps some inappropriateness with a father and a daughter, and the father was trying to get that through, that he recognized that he had acted inappropriately and what had happened. And so there was some really big, big emotion from the other side as well, as of that they were able to be heard and to have the message delivered. So it's an ongoing learning, I have to say, but it's also having boundaries, for those of you that are doing readings. Sometimes those of us who are of service have a hard time saying no because we know we're here to help. And but the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to say no when we know that we're too exhausted.
Do you ever have spirits coming back to you and wanting to follow up? I've had a couple of people mediums who've been working with criminal investigations, and they find that the spirit who's trying to get messages through comes round out of bounds. Is that an issue? Has that ever been an issue for you, and how did you set that boundary?
It's happened before. I set a boundary because I was a reporter on this side and saw murders afterwards, was exposed to, as I spoke of earlier, hostage situations or very tense moments on the earth. I had asked not to work. I mean, if I'm called to do it, and it happens to be a client in front of me, but I had been offered a television show to be a psychic detective. And for some reason, that's how Hollywood thinks of it always, maybe to legitimize it in some way. But I have had them follow up before, but I know that that's not been my primary area of connection. It's been more of healing and of moving forward. I know that some mediums, like their specialty might be more investigative. If that makes sense. But I have had somebody follow up, and I have to be careful sometimes. Those crime shows that have, unsolved mysteries or an open case. I found long ago when I started watching, I was watching one once, and if somebody got my attention, that I had to be careful to close the channel too. And this is where one of my teachers said, Tina, you have to have a do not disturb sign on the inside of your door of your bedroom. You have to learn how to have boundaries because they're not in a body. So if you don't have your boundaries, they'll come and go and keep trying to get at you. And not in a bad way, but just in a way that finally they have somebody who's listening to them. So I can imagine if I were in the other world, and when I find somebody that can hear me, and that can help me, I'm sure it's very exciting.
A bit like that wonderful sign from Ghost. Do you remember when Whoopi Goldberg didn't want to talk to Patrick Swayze? And
yes.
He was just saying, I'll keep singing 10 Green Bottles until you do what I want you to do.
Yes, and I've asked them, really, I've made requests that unless it's an emergency or it's something I really, that they forget that I'm in a human body, and that I do need my rest, and that I do have some sort of office hours. That was one of the hardest things. But if it is an emergency, I'm available.
And what do you think about these so-called, street readings? When you're out at the hairdressers and you get an intuition for the person who's doing your hair. How do you feel about that?
You know what? I don't usually do that, although I will always ask the person and give them a choice if they would like to receive a message, rather than running up and blurting out a message to them that they didn't ask for. Does that make, because, I'm very aware of their personal space. And I think when we have choice always, then we feel we have some power over whether we receive something or not. A lot of times people do want to receive the messages, but I am careful to ask.
Do you get that where spirits come through, tell her I'm here or something like that? Do you get spirits coming in?
Yes, I do. Sometimes I do, not all the time, because I learned if I was open all the time, then I was really exhausted. I wasn't closing my energy. I wasn't clearing my energy. I was just in the Netherlands, and I just returned this week, and I was working there, and I was in a grocery store. And this boy, well, he was a young man, was in the aisle, and I saw that he had a tattoo, but I didn't have my glasses on, so I couldn't see it completely clearly. But I walked past him, and his mother stopped me on the other side, and I was like, okay. And I told my friend, hold on a moment here, which it's unusual for me to do this. So I went back and I said, how are you? Are you all right? And he said he was kind of in a daze. And I said, I believe I have a message for you. Are you open to receiving one? And so he said he was. And I said to him, I have a female here. She has a mother vibration, and she just needs you to know you've been thinking about her all day, and you're worried, and she needs you to know that it's okay. And then he turned to his tattoo. He said, this is my mother on my arm. He said, I need to ask her for forgiveness because she was ill, And I was really upset that I had to take care of her. And I didn't treat her, I don't think, in the best way that I should. And this all happened in a grocery store. He said, so please, can you ask her? I said, she can hear you. And so there was this, and I had an interpreter, and it all happened very spontaneously. And when we left him, he looked completely different. And I was very grateful. So in that case, it was lovely.
Wonderful. Do you normally have any difficulty working through an interpreter with people?
You know, my guide sent me somebody from Japan right off the bat. So, and I was so nervous about this. How is this going to work? You know, and I found that no, I don't have an issue. Although, you know, still there can be some differences culturally in how I say something or how I pull something through. So clarity or receiving, you know, I always double or triple check that and hope that that's clear. However, with the Asian gentleman, it worked right away. So no, usually it works in tandem, and it's quite lovely.
You're going to be doing a big platform demonstration at the symposium coming up, the three mediums. Tell us, how does it work with a platform? How do you know who the message is for?
You know, it's always in those moments where we do platform, you really have to go in with faith and trust that the right person will receive the message. Last year we did this, and this was a new thing for me. I've done platform reading, but I hadn't done it with several mediums, and it was quite wonderful, actually. So many times information will come through. We had 900 people or more. So sometimes as I look around the room, I can see a light in a certain area. Sometimes they'll give me a name or an instance. And so you'll have several people raise their hands, and then more information comes through and you deduct it from there. It's not always a perfect science. And then with the platform, with the other two mediums, when we're all working on the same level and in cooperation, it flows, and it's quite beautiful. So I'm very excited about this.
That's fantastic. You're going to be available for private readings there.
Yes. I'll be available for readings. It's going to be a very wonderful weekend. So I'm doing private readings and several talks, and also teaching people how to open themselves more to receiving messages from their loved ones in spirit.
How should people best prepare for a reading if they've got an appointment?
Good question. I think centering themselves, being open-minded. I think that realizing that many times spirit, sometimes they'll send me symbols. I remember one time I was reading for somebody and I got sent a wrench. And I'm like, a wrench? And it turned out that her father was buried with a wrench, and he was a carpenter. So that spirit talks symbolically. I think the most important thing is I've had people say, I'm skeptical, you know, and come in and you know, I think most of us can still read I think there's a healthy skepticism, but I think when there's a relaxed atmosphere for the person who's sitting, just being open to what comes in, it's a better experience. I also think, you know, once the person who's receiving the reading feels comfortable, it's okay. You know, you're not giving anything away. I've had people show up and they're completely like reading to a wall. And they just don't know that, you know, once they feel comfortable, they can also talk. They can ask questions. So I would just say most of all, be open-minded. And I've probably said that about 3 times now.
Do you have personal symbols, you know, that a red rose means a certain thing? Or
yes.
Yes,
many times there's an alphabet. So I would say to all of you, if there was a wedding, somebody had just gotten married, or there was something really serious, in the image in your mind, what would that be? Would it be rice being thrown? Would it be wedding rings? What would it be? And so you start to have a symbolic alphabet with your guides and with spirit. So for me, whenever I see a yellow balloon, that signifies birthday. Whenever I see confetti being thrown, it's usually an anniversary celebration. And some of these are very basic, and then the reading goes from there, but they'll just let me know. So they'll send almost like a snapshot of a picture inside my mind.
So can you give us some idea of how you work with your guides?
Sometimes it's felt, well, let's see, it can feel different at different times. I would say I feel a collective. Some people are very comfortable with my guide is, White Eagle. For me, it's been very organic, and that I feel them all around me, and that it's they're directly sending download of thoughts, information, and pictures. So it's more collective for me. But sometimes I have this image of the other person's guides that I'm reading for, and my guides, like having a conference, like we're having a conference here. Mm-hmm. So they're in the other world, having a conference and getting through everything that they would like to get through.
Interesting. Do you ever have people who are concerned about the religious aspect of what you're doing? I'm thinking particularly people from the Bible Belt who have been told that they're likely to be communicating with dark forces.
Yes. And like not that Indiana was Bible Belt, but it's around that area, although they do have some, like Camp Chesterfield there. I remember stopping on my way there asking for directions, and they said, "You mean that devil place?" And I said, the last time I checked, I think it was a spiritual center of light, and the Dalai Lama was just there, but that's okay. I was brought up in this lifetime Catholic, and they sent me to private Catholic school. And so certainly doing what I'm doing wasn't looked upon as the best thing I could be doing. And so my thought around that was, well, if you all believe that Jesus appeared to everybody to let them know he was okay, and they had apparitions, why is it a bad thing if some of us can see or hear somebody to give some relief? So for me, religion, the foundation of it, I'm very grateful for it. The isms, that's just me, the isms I feel are more man-made. And then above all of that is, our collectiveness, our heart-centeredness, our spirituality, and it goes well beyond that. So I try to let them know, because for some people, knowing I had a background in that is helpful for them. For some people also to know that I don't identify, I would just call myself spiritual at this point in time, and that it's safe, and that you always go by how you feel. So if you're receiving a reading and you feel cold, you feel prickly, you don't feel good, that's an indication, that's your own intuitive information kicking in and saying, this isn't the right situation for me, or this isn't the right person for me. I had this wonderful man show up, and he said, "Tina, you know what a good reading is?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "You either feel closer to God or further away. If you feel further away, it wasn't a good reading."
Beautiful, beautiful. On that note, I think we'll open it up to the gallery, and we'll take questions or anybody who'd like to make a comment. So just put your hand up and I can see you, and we'll take it from there. Anybody has a question for Tina? Sheila Lowe. Sheila, over to you.
How do you feel about prayers of protection? I keep hearing on both sides.
What of protection? Say that again.
Prayers of protection.
Oh, I love prayers of protection. I do have a prayer that I say before I do a reading always. And I just ask to work and be protected in the highest light. I do feel I'm already protected, but I know when we ask for something, it amplifies it. I also, and you said prayers of protection on the other side? You mean of
no, I just wondered if you feel that it's necessary to do that. You just said that you did, but I've heard
I like to do it.
Yeah, some say that it's not necessary, so I just was curious.
Oh, for me, it just, because there's that whole thing about asking for what you would like and setting a sacred space. So for me, the prayer is part of that. But it isn't necessarily religious, but it's not in fear, like, oh, I'm afraid that something, negative is going to happen at all. In fact, during a reading, nothing negative has ever happened, which is lovely. I mean, as far as feeling afraid or anything like that.
Thank you.
Another question. Thank you, Kathleen.
Tina, thank you so much for your sharing. Do you have incidences in your life where you have stuff going on that's maybe very troublesome and negative, and you find that spirits just can't get through to you, and what do you do when that happens?
So if I'm going through something on my own emotionally, if I'm really in a place for myself or going through something that is wreaking havoc, I usually will remove myself from I'll give myself a break from holding it for other people. But I have found that it was sort of, for me, like when I was anchoring the news, I couldn't go, well, I've got to go lay down because I'm having a horrible day. Or I would be out of a job. So I know that if I'm supposed to do a reading, like say I end up having an issue of my own and somebody's flying in for one, my guides will usually take care of me and the focus comes back in, and it actually helps me. But I would always stop a reading if it didn't seem like it was working, or, I think sometimes we forget that we have the freedom to, just always tell the truth of our own experience. I mean, of course, we're not going to share. There's nothing like going to a therapist and having them share what's going on with them. And you're like, I'm paying you and you're talking about yourself. So I would never do that. But I would excuse myself if I felt that there was interference, for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, you had a question.
I just had a comment on Sheila. You had asked about, having prayers of protection, and I'd have to support everything that Tina said on that. I do a lot of energy work with people, and whenever I start a session, I ask very deliberately, and it helps me focus so that everything happens for that person's highest healing good. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably where Tina was going with that as well. So it just helps you focus. So is it absolutely necessary? No, but it really does help you to focus on the things that you want. Well, I shouldn't say you want, but that spirit will deliver for them in, for their highest healing good.
Thank you.
Question at the moment. I would like to give the comment. I'm so glad, Tina, that you had amazing time doing the platform reading last year, because I was the mother of the son who came, one of those two basketball players. And I have something amazing to tell you. You said that there is something about the trees and the purple trees. And I told you we cut 4 trees because we have the Alzheimer's patient who's our neighbor. And he was having fuss about those trees, the roots going to his driveway. So my husband cut all those trees, and I told you that during the reading, and that I was planning to plant the tree. Well, Alex took care of it. He said through you that it was supposed to be the purple tree, which I thought it should be because he wanted to play for Lakers, and their color is purple. And I didn't have to do anything. I had surgery. I couldn't plant the tree. And all of a sudden, from the wisteria that is on the other side of the pathway, now I have 4 plants of wisteria that are sprouting, but Alex helped. And so I'm going to put them all together and make 1 or 2 trees, and they're purple, of course.
Oh, I love that. So you had a big demonstration from him, and
Yes.
those are the evidentiary moments where we can breathe and know that everything is okay.
Okay. Tina, what are the 5 things that you would like people to know about the afterlife, that you think everybody should know about what happens when you die?
Obviously that we are eternal beings, and that we're all connected, and that our loved ones are never far away. I would like people to know that it doesn't, a lot of people go, oh, if I'm holding on to somebody, is that causing the person to not be able to go forward? And I would like people to know that, no, they can be many different places. It's just like here on the earth, we have to get a ticket to go to Hawaii. There, it's thought form, and you're not holding them back. The person would be holding themselves back. I would like people to know that they give us signs all the time. Whether there are many things that can be manipulated in this environment. Some people receive coins, some people to trust that the birds, when you think that it is from your loved one, it is. I would like people to also know that they use the dream time, after they pass many times to get through our logic part. So you'll know you had a visitation because it stays in your aura for the rest of the time you're on the earth. When we have a usual dream, it may fade into the day, and we may be doing subconscious dumping or problem solving, so I would like people to know that they use this quite often, and it's remarkable. I would also like people to know, would you repeat the question one more time?
What are 5 things that you would like people to know about the afterlife? Or about spirit communication, if you like.
Well, also too, that they have shown me, I would like people to know that I've seen libraries in the other world. I've seen, it's hard for our minds sometimes to fathom that there's a whole other environment over there. So I would like people to know I've seen hospitals, I've seen all sorts of images from there. So I would like people to know that when you reach out to them, many times there will be somebody that shows up in your life with a message. I don't know if you all have found that. Somebody who even looks similar. Or they'll use somebody to deliver, something important to you. I would also like people to know that there's, at least in my experience, that when I tune into that, there's peace. I feel a feeling of peace.
Beautiful. And if you're somebody here who's grieving for the loss of a loved one, what message would you give them?
I think grieving also indicates how deeply we loved and we love. That it's a part of the human experience, and none of us want to feel pain. I mean, we run away from it. We do all sorts of things so we don't feel it. All of us. I mean, so I would like people to know it's a measure of truly living, because when we connect with another individual, we've allowed ourselves to have a full experience. If we were not connected and didn't care and indifferent, then we've not really allowed ourselves to love. I would like people to know it's okay to cry. It's okay to have those moments. It's important. We don't want to sidestep the mourning always, but we also don't want to stay stuck there. I went to Israel, and we went in the tomb, and I was there, and people were walking out and crying, and this was my experience. I was like, I'm not feeling anything. And my father said to me, Tina, you're sensitive. What are you getting? And I said, I'm really getting nothing, but I'm getting that there's a celebration, that we're not to stay stuck in the morning. So it's important not to stay there, right? That and go over and over, and also to ask for help if you're stuck in a place of mourning. There are mediums, they're wonderful spiritual therapists. You can ask your guides for help, and if you're open, they'll send you the divine right person for you. And also, it doesn't hurt to try a medium, even though we have our own link with our person. Sometimes hearing it from another direction helps us really believe and have hope again of the eternalness and the largeness of of this experience.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work? I understand you've written a book and that you do travel a lot.
Yes, I've written a book called Reporting for the Other Side. It's from the newsroom to working for Spirit and reporting what they have to say, which is maybe a little more interesting, or I should say a lot more interesting. I've been doing private sessions now for about 15 years. So I always enjoy the one-on-one and group sessions and pulling through information that might be of service. I also receive information from guides about people's purposes. They call it Dharma, which is why we came here, so we don't forget what our mission is. We can be in mourning, but we can't forget about ourselves and what our soul signed up to do while we're here and our full capacity. I also travel. I was just in the Netherlands doing a conference. It was a women's conference, but speaking about intuition and honoring ourselves, and also honoring, our compass within. I do a lot of work with that. How we feel, how we see, helping people, assisting them in opening up their own channels of communication. And I'm very grateful to do this work. I didn't know that this was coming for me, but I'm in complete gratitude to be able to do it. And I think if we always stay with what the intention is, our intention in either being a reader or our intention in being a healer, then we can't go wrong.
You mentioned doing what we came here to do. Do you believe that we've all come here with a purpose or a soul plan, if you like?
Yes, I do believe that we came. I always say this is what I know so far, and I hope I know more tomorrow. So what I know today is that we came maybe to work on various subjects. I think on Earth, there's a duality here on the Earth. So, here's fear and love. Here's, we can learn about abandonment, rejection, many of these different elements, and going back to a place of healing within ourselves. At the same time, I believe there's a divine design for our life of what we're best at. Sometimes we try to do a lot of things that we think we should do, but that we don't feel passionate about. So I believe that we signed up to do, I don't know if it's just one thing, or I believe we're multidimensional, but, and that we're searching. I have a lot of people that show up and they say, I'm searching for my purpose. And a lot of times it's right in front of them. They just haven't realized the full expression of it. That's all. It was placed in the heart, like the Wizard of Oz said. It's just helping people remember.
Thank you so much. We've had a wonderful talk. I'd like to call on various people just to thank Tina. Just put your hand up when you're ready to thank her and tell her the impact of what she said this morning. Michelle.
Tina, I'd like to thank you so much for the work that you do. I think all mediums who are doing this type of work are super special. And, we found that with Voices Across the Veil, it really brings such healing to people that it is truly one of the most important types of work that we can do. So thank you.
I second that.
Thank you.
Somebody else?
Thank Tina very much for her loving work and the way she worked here tonight. For everybody, not just for me, but for other people, and what she said. There's a lot of lovely information there.
Thank you, Tina, for everything that you do for us. You're divinely chosen, and you know that. And thank you for your sunny personality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina, for your loving spirit, for your faithfulness, and for the work that you do, for doing what you're called to do.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm humbled. Mm-hmm.
Tina, it was an absolute joy having you here today. And I'm just blown away. For me, the big revelation was that just how well Spirit prepares us in our early experience for what is to come.